everyone, and welcome to our final Dojo Live show of the week. My name is Kim Lantis, and it's my pleasure to be hosting today out of Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico, along with my co-host, America Guerrero. Where are you? Querétaro today.
Querétaro, yes.
She's been traveling a lot, lady. Hard to keep up. And of course, the guest today, the most important person on our show today, is Stephanie Cox, CEO at Lumavate. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Excited to be here and chat with all of you.
Yes, it's going to be super fun to learn from you and learn more about Lumavate and the problem that you're solving with mobile messaging and marketing and how we can market better. So we do look forward to that conversation. But before we get there, we really would love to learn more about you, your story, your passion, what makes you tick, and ultimately kind of what led up to Lumavate. Please tell us. Thank you.
So, I've been in marketing for almost 20 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about how fast time has passed. But, I went to college thinking I wanted to be, and this is like a blast from the past, a newspaper reporter, because that was a big thing 20 years ago. And I think one of the things I realized was I really don't want to do that. And I fell in love with marketing, advertising, PR. And I graduated in the early 2000s. And back then, what seems crazy today is not every company had a website. Social media wasn't a thing. And I was the young person that was tasked with figuring all of that out. So I kind of really lucked into digital marketing and the really start and growth of that. I always tell people that success in a career is like a combination of hard work and luck. Some of it is timing and people, right? I can't say I planned to graduate at the time that digital marketing was starting to take off. But I was really blessed to work at some more smaller mid-sized companies early in my career, which I always tell a college graduate, if you want to be a CMO one day or a CEO one day, start at a smaller company early on, because you learn how to do so many different things.
Yes.
And right, not everyone talks about, they're like, oh, go work for a big brand. I'm like, that's great, but you're going to learn how to do one or two things really well. Smaller companies, you learn how to do everything really well.
And I think, and not just the skills, but the soft skill side of it, right?
Yes.
The grit and the problem solving, and
you're just exposed to more of how a business functions than you are when you get into a larger company. So really blessed early on, and fell in love with marketing, started doing really well at it. I would tell you, there's been a couple of inflection points in my career that led me to where I am today. One was about 12 years ago. I was working for a really large enterprise brand, but we were this kind of unique startup within it. And one of the things that was interesting was I grew up in the Midwest of the United States, and I'm a woman. So I was kind of raised to be kind and sweet and nice and all the things. And that is great. But oftentimes in the workforce, when you kind of take those traits moving forward, you're not heard. People don't take you seriously. They don't always listen to you. And I remember being in a meeting, we had this problem for 6 months, and it wasn't my area, but I kept bringing up ideas of how to solve it. And I just felt like I was being talked over. And then finally, 6 months into this conversation, a guy says the exact same things I've been saying for months. And I lost it, not in the room. I was just right, because I'm still in this mode of smile and be nice. Don't be difficult. And I went home to my husband, and I was just just lost it. Right. Why don't they listen to me? He goes, well, why didn't you ask him, tell him that was a great idea when you said it 6 months ago? And I was like, well, I would never do that. He goes, but I would. And I was like, well, that's a good point. Right. And I think that's when I started to realize, one, I'm really talented at what I do. And you need to know that. I needed to tell myself that. And also I need to stop asking permission to do my job. So from that moment on, I really decided that I was just going to start doing what I believed was right. I was going to stop asking permission. I was going to ask forgiveness. And if I saw problems in other areas, I would bring them up to the person responsible for that area. I would wait a period of time. And for those of people that know me, know that period of time is very short, because I'm not a patient person. And then I'm going to just start fixing it until they tell me to knock it off. And it's been, 12 years now in my career since that moment. And people don't tell me to knock it off.
Nice. And hello, female CEO of a tech company.
Right. Well, and that's a funny story too, because and it's like another inflection point in my career. I never thought about being a CEO. I never saw, that wasn't growing up something I saw a ton of. I didn't know other CEOs, women leaders in tech, which is where I've spent most of my career, just haven't been that prevalent early on. So I never thought I was going to be a CEO. And I remember having breakfast with someone. This was about 7 years ago. And he was a member of a board that a company I worked for at the time. And at the end of breakfast, he goes, "You're going to make an excellent CEO one day." And I laughed at him.
You're like, wait, that's my career path?
Right? Like I literally laughed hysterically at him at breakfast. I was like, "That's so funny." He was like, "I'm being serious." I was like, "Wait, what?" Like I thought I took it as a joke, which is funny. I think it speaks to a lot of different things. One, that even though, I know how talented I am, there's still this part of me that questions, right? Well, why do you think, why would I be a CEO? But then also it started to get me thinking about, okay, is he right? And I asked him, well, why do you think that? And he kind of explained his reasoning to me. And from that moment on, I wouldn't say that I pursued being a CEO. It wasn't like this thing that I strived to make happen. It was something that I was always like, this is kind of ideally what would be my long-term goal. And I've never been driven by titles. I've never been really driven by a lot of traditional things. I'm driven by challenges. So I like hard, difficult problems to solve. My executive coach often says, you like the unsolvable problems, the things that seem impossible, excite you. And I'm like, that, yes.
Yes. So that actually brings us up to Lumavate, which I'm assuming is a company that's solving then a very challenging problem. So tell us more about the company that you're
leading. So we've been around for about 7 years now. And I think one of the things that is unique from our perspective is I've been the marketer that we're selling to. So I've been the person that's had this problem, so passionately and desperately. And I've also been the person that has done, I like to ask forgiveness, not permission. So I found ways to make it work in large enterprises. So what we empower primarily marketers to do is to build all different types of digital experiences with absolutely no code. So everything from mobile apps to landing pages to portals, connected products, you name it. And to do that in a way that's highly customizable. So it looks and feels like your brand, has the interactions that you want, but also doesn't require you to be in this development queue that takes forever. Because to be honest, IT and developers don't care about your brand the way that you do, right? Changing the hex color because it's off by 2 numbers is not a big deal to them. To me, it's a huge deal. So we want to put the power back in the hands of marketers, because anyone that's been a marketer in the last 5 to 10 years knows that you have to move faster than ever. You're expected to deliver results almost instantaneously. There's very little patience for wait and see. And that becomes really difficult when you're relying on someone else to create those experiences. And then recently we just added mobile messaging functionality to our platform as well, because oftentimes you think about them separately, which is kind of ironic because most digital experiences are consumed on a mobile device. So why wouldn't you tie messaging to those experiences and make it a more holistic experience for your customers?
It makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a great kind of segue into today's topic that you chose for us. America, what is that topic?
The topic is mobile messaging, the untapped marketing channel that drives incredible results. With a 98% average open rate and 45% average response rate, why is mobile messaging the most underutilized marketing channel? So please share with us why.
Yeah, so it's a really simple reason. It's highly regulated. So, right? And I think a lot of people, marketers, and just businesses have misconceptions about it because it's highly regulated. So one of the things that's very different from mobile messaging around text compared to email is, while there are fines and regulations, tied to that, the reality is we all get spam every single day, right? And the FTC is not chasing down companies that spam you and fining them. Very different with mobile messaging. So the way mobile messaging works, right? You have a phone number, and that phone number is owned by a carrier. So Like in the United States, we're, Sprint, T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, and there's different carriers for every different region of the world. And so when you send a message, whichever platform you use to send the message, from a marketing perspective or a transactional perspective, it's then sent to the carrier to deliver it. And the carrier decides if it goes to your phone number or not. So,
I had no idea.
So oftentimes what happens is if you let's say you start spamming and sending messages or too many in a certain period of time, the carrier just stops delivering all messages from your phone number. And they don't tell you, right? Plus, there are also a lot of regulations around it, and fees associated with it. So there's been this perception by marketers that it's just really hard or difficult to do. And that's part of the reason why they haven't taken the time to adopt it. So there's a couple of different, the other challenge is if you're global, in reality, and I've done messaging programs in 10 different countries in my career, you have to have different like programs, phone numbers set up for each region. So I can't really, from like let's say a toll-free number or a US-based short code, which is gonna be like a 5 or 6 digit number, I can't guarantee deliverability to a phone number in EMEA. So in London or France from that number. Ideally, I would have a UK long code, which is going to be a 10-digit number that I would send those marketing or transactional messages to consumers from. And so you start talking about that. And then people get a little anxious. Because let's talk about Brazil, right? Like in Brazil, there's even more regulations around it. So now you're talking about every region that you operate in, and sometimes even specific countries have very different requirements that you have to go through. And there are oftentimes, there can be approval processes depending on what you're trying to do. So I'll just give an example on the United States. You can send from a standard phone number, right? So a non-toll-free phone number, but those are going to be throttled oftentimes. Which means you can't send as many. They're not designed to do that. You can send from a toll-free number, which is what a lot of people have been choosing to do recently. And part of that reason is because they're not as heavily regulated as short codes, which we'll talk about in a second, but they're starting to get more regulation around them. So now you have to submit a lot of documentation about your mobile messaging program in order to be able to send a certain number of text messages from that number on a monthly basis. And then the most regulated one is short codes, which are those 5 or 6 digit numbers. And they're not available in every country or every region, but they can send at a higher volume. They also, in the United States at least, in Canada, when you submit a short code, you submit that, like, as an example, to like Twilio. Twilio then submits it to each carrier. And so not only does Twilio approve you, so you can send from their platform, but then every carrier approves you. So it may take 12 weeks from the moment you decide to do this to when you can actually use that short code to send messages. And just all of that is why a lot of marketers for the last 10 years are like, oh, mobile is like, whoa, too hard. It's like email is easy, right? Social media ads, they're easy to do compared to kicking off a mobile messaging program. But the part that to me is like the most like frustrating, I like want to shake marketers and be like, you guys, like you're missing out, is we would kill, like marketers would kill for an open rate above like 40 or 50%.
Yeah.
98%. Like, and it's crazy because it's like, I think it's 98% within 3 minutes. So it's not even just that they're opening it, they're doing it quickly. And they're having, an average response rate of almost, it's like 45% is still absolutely crazy. I can't think of any other marketing channel that comes anywhere close to those types of numbers.
Yeah, I mean, 45% response rate is going to be easily 10 more than 10 times the average probably you're getting from an email or something.
Right. And oftentimes, like what we'll hear is, especially if people have like a native mobile app, they'll say, oh, well, we do push. And I'm like, okay, so let's talk about that. What do you do as a consumer when a native mobile app will ask you, would you like to receive notifications? And almost every single marketer I talk to goes, well, I say no. And I'm like, cool. So why would you think your customers would say yes to you? And then it's like this reckoning where they're like, oh. So, and when you start talking about it, especially with some of the changes that Apple has made recently, and Android's a little bit different on how they treat push, but now it's easier to opt out or silence push notifications to begin with. So the opt-in rate is abysmal anyways. It's less than 10% on iOS devices. The engagement rate from the people that opt in is abysmal. It's like 2 to 3%. So even if you're doing it and you can, no one is paying attention to it. You know, what people want push notifications for are like important things, right? Like they want to see that they have 45 emails to read, or they have, 20 text messages, or someone commented them on social that they need to go respond to. They don't want to get I love Sephora, but I don't want a push notification from Sephora that there's a sale, right? Like you already sent me 6 emails. I know. And so I think that's where, there's pros and cons to this kind of governance that exists around mobile messaging, right? The con is you have to do some work, but the pro is hardly anyone else is doing it. And so you have so much better results. And the reality is, unless marketers decide to take the time and really not just, do the governance portion, because you have to make changes to privacy and terms, et cetera, but actually put together a mobile messaging program that makes sense for their consumers and their customers, there's a huge miss that a lot of us are experiencing.
Yeah. So how is Lumavate, let's say, okay, it's hard, or at least it's perceived to be hard. How do you make it easy for your users to tap into the mobile messaging? I had no idea that this was actually the complication. Like in my mind, I just felt that it was sort of archaic,
an aggressive approach,
right? Like, no, not aggressive so much as like unnecessary, because that's just not where people are, right? Like, because in my mind, I'm thinking, the socials, like you mentioned, emailing, that's where I live. And going back to your point, I think, Stephanie, like you just don't get messages as traditional SMS hardly anymore. Not even between people, right? I just don't communicate that way, generally speaking. So that was what I had in my mind. But then it makes a lot of sense. If you can break through into that, then you're basically the only one there.
Yes.
Right? Which is a big, big plus. So how do you make it easy to get to that point?
Yeah. So kind of, what we wanted to do as we thought about, first we enabled you to build these digital experiences, like what's next. And we already include in our platform the ability to access digital experiences from multiple different ways. So everyone thinks about them from the standard URL. We were doing QR codes before everyone else was doing QR codes. And then we do NFC, which is near field communication. So it's what like powers things like Apple Pay, Android Pay, et cetera. And then we did text. So we've always let people get to digital experience by texting in a keyword to a number as another way that you can get there, because we know people are on their mobile devices. So for our customers, at least, that's always been a portion of what they were doing. They just weren't able to then message anyone. So what we decided to do is, I hear this from our team a lot, is I just want to take like what's in your head. And so we took what was in my head and we productized it. So you don't know how to start your mobile messaging program and all the legal requirements. Cool. You fill out this one form, explain. It basically helps you get to all the things that we need to be able to do to submit on your behalf to make sure your program's set up correctly. And it gives you lots of examples. You submit that, our team reviews it to make sure everything is correct and that you don't have any miss. So we know that you're going to get approved. We submit it for you. And then literally all you have to do then is, and there's also a lot of regulation around like how you promote it. We take care of that. So as an example, you want to collect mobile opt-ins on a digital experience that you build on Lumavate. Really simple. You create a form. There's a mobile opt-in component. It lays down everything for you, including the required legal language that ties back to your mobile guidelines that you told us you're going to do, that we approved. And so it really ensures that you're compliant. Well, one, that your program's set up correctly, that you're compliant, and that all of the data is going to come in. So that's really kind of how it kind of came to life and what we did, because oftentimes, we talk to customers and, maybe they're pursuing a short code and they'd be like, well, could you help us with like the short code application process? Or, oh, we want to do we want to send these types of text messages. And I'm like, oh, well, you can't, because like those terms are flagged, right? We make all of that easier for you to see. So if you do have, like, let's say you send someone a text message, if I were to send one to one of you and it were to be undelivered or failed for some reason, like, we're going to expose the error code so you know exactly why it failed. And maybe it's because the word and phrase that you used is actually prohibited by carriers, right? And there are, if you work, especially in healthcare or life sciences with those types of customers, there's a lot of words that you use in your business that are actually flagged by carriers because they don't expect people to be communicating about them. So all those things we just really try to productize and make it really simple. Another great example, everyone loves emojis, or at least I love emojis, and
Guilty.
right, lots of emojis. But what people don't realize is when you send a text message, while the emoji looks like one character on your device, some emojis actually are multiple characters when they're sent via text. So a text message is typically 160 characters when you're sending a promotional or transactional one. And if it's more than that, it breaks it into 2 messages, and you'll always receive the latter half of the message first. And so we actually tell you and prevent you from sending more than 160 characters. But then if you're using things like emojis or special characters in other languages that do actually take up more than 2 characters upon send, it'll actually tell you that it's going to be into multiple segments and how many segments that it's going to appear on the device. So you know. So I was going to say, we really took what was in my head around 10 years of expertise doing this and made it and gave it to everyone.
It's amazing.
So you also give recommendations if you want to start, for example, a sequence, but just with the mobile messaging format.
Consulting side.
Exactly. So, for example, as an SDR, you have this recommendation that if you're going to send an email, you need to send it with the size of the content that you're going to send. It must be the same size as you're going to read it in your phone, right? So you give that kind of recommendations as the emojis and what else?
Yeah, we're also around like topics and like how to structure it. So sometimes you find this with every new channel, right? When marketers, we have like a good and bad relationship with technology, like as an entire persona. So the good relationship is we tend to latch onto new technology really fast and get really excited about it. The bad part is sometimes we get a little too aggressive and make poor choices that causes the governments to come in and regulate us. Right? Like email marketing is a great example of that. So what we really try and do, especially early on, is there's kind of different buckets around how you should think about your mobile messaging based on the type of content you want to send, and really helping customers like think about like, are you going to send transactional messages, right? So transactional messages are you did something, and like the best ones are like ordering online. You ordered online, your package just shipped. That's a great example of a transactional message. And those are, I think, one use case, but promotional content is another big use case for marketers. But even within that can get into multiple different layers. So part of what we help people do is thinking through and giving recommendations on like, what is the purpose of your program? It can't just be to send people text messages. That's just going to fail, and you're just likely going to alienate your base.
That was my question. Like, what does this interaction look like? What's the call to action? What's the end goal, right? The expectation of a message that you're sending.
Exactly. And why is text the right channel for it, right? I think that's the other big thing. So I'll give like one example around like employees. There are multiple ways to communicate with employees. One of the best ways to communicate urgent or critical information that you want to guarantee everyone sees is text, right? It's a great way because we know people are going to read it. The downside is if you send every message via text, no one will read it anymore, even if they can't legally like opt out of it because it's an employee communication. So part of it is, one, what's the purpose? What's the frequency? Like what falls into that bucket in terms of what we should be able to do, and what's the frequency? You cannot send as many text messages as, especially retail brands do with email. Like I can't get 4 text messages from you a day. And part of that is regulated. So when someone opts in, they say, they're opting in to receive X number of messages per week, day, or month. And carriers hold you to that. So if you start going way outside of it, you start getting flagged. But part of it's around like, how do you think about the structure of your whole program overall? What is the purpose? Why is text the right thing? What are examples of, and you submit this with part of your, at least for us to use our platform, you have to give us examples and we'll help you with them around what types of messages are you going to send out? Like, what do you think a text message is going to be? And then what kind of guidance and strategy can we help you put around that to make sure it makes sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I'm curious. I mean, we're coming down to the kind of final 4 minutes of our show. And I wanted to come back to the tech side. You mentioned early on in the show that it's no code for the marketers. I think that piece of technology is awesome. I can see immediately, just the speed, the ramp time, and all of those benefits. But I'm curious about your technology at Lumavate of how you're able to make this happen in terms of like research and regulations and keeping things up to date. Like, is most of this happening like by manpower, or is this computer power? Like, what's happening behind the scenes?
All the things. So I think, a couple of different things to frame that. So first, when we first started in 2015, and we made we started with one version of our product, and we made a pretty big shift around 2017, 2018 to kind of the architecture we have today, which is using a lot of what I think most IT leaders would tell you is very forward-looking technology. So we use a lot around Docker containers. And one example of why that's so important is we do bi-weekly product releases. So we're constantly pushing out new functionality to our customers, and we include it at no charge. We're not trying to upsell you on a new product or new functionality, but we push out a new version of any integration or design element you're using in your experiences. So unlike other platforms that, at some point they just force you to upgrade, we never do that. And so that's, I think, a big fundamental piece of it. It allows us to move really quickly, but also ensure that we never break production. We also have a serverless architecture, so we can scale really rapidly in terms of number of customers and users across all their experiences. And that, was also, a very different approach than maybe, what other people think. So for us, we are solely on AWS. Everything runs in our own cloud, which, isn't ideal if you're used to even an on-prem solution. We are not the person for you. But if you want to talk about, a solution that, has exceptional reliability, that is constantly pushing out new functionality and takes care of all of the scale and security, because we do work with some of the largest enterprise brands in the world. That's kind of who we are and what we do really, really well. And then I think, from a new functionality perspective, like I said, our engineering team is fantastic about pushing out, kind of two different pieces. One is the platform. So like mobile messaging functionality, that was a big platform enhancement. And then the second piece are these design elements and integrations, which are more of where you get these updated versions that come out. But we, every other Thursday, we're pushing out stuff. And then we also do best-in-class templates for really common use cases. I think we'll have close to 50 by the end of the year that allow you to take, you name it. If you have, let's say you sell faucets and you want to do a product registration experience, you can take that template and literally in less than 30 minutes have it fully functioning, customized to your brand and live. So we really try and make it easy and seamless for marketers.
One of the things I'm hearing kind of just about the company you're building, your leadership, is this really interesting intersection of new technology, but also holding on to the simple side, like mobile messaging. If it's working, why fix it, right?
Yeah.
So how do you find that balance between the new and the old? And what other components of your company culture do you find to be really integral to keeping you going?
Crazy ideas, I think, are the biggest one that people would tell you. Oftentimes for me, when I think about what we should do from a product perspective or like the services that we should provide our customers, doing what everyone else does is table stakes, in my opinion. So if a competitor is doing it, like, we should have been doing it already. I want to do the things that no one else is doing, and I want to do them in a way when they seem really hard, we've made them really easy. And that's oftentimes like what we hear the most about our platform and just working with our team is that we make it easy to do business. And that's really what we want to do. So if something is hard around, a great example is data. Data is really hard. When you connect to like your Salesforce instance, you oftentimes on other platforms, you need to know like how it's architected and all the different rules around it. Our Salesforce integration takes 5 to 10 minutes to set up, and we prevent you from passing data that won't work for certain fields. So for instance, if you have a field in Salesforce that only can accept numeric data, when you go to add a numeric component field to your form, it only allows you to pick from the fields that can accept it. Right. So we just took some of the things out that typically like cause marketers like strife, and just said like, what if we just made it simple? You don't need to understand how Salesforce works. You just need to push data to it and pull data from it. Right. You don't need to be a data architect. That's what your Salesforce team is there for. But then we also gave them, right, the ability to come in and control what their team can and can't do within experiences using the Salesforce data. So lots of layers to it, but we really want to make it easy for people and take the complexity out of delivering complex, highly engaging, personalized experiences.
Beautiful. I love it. Well, Stephanie, it has been a wonderful show, wonderful time getting to know you, to learn from you. I am truly inspired and impressed just by your drive and where you've come as an individual and where you've taken Lumavate as well. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. We wish you nothing but success. Stay with us real quick as we go off air, just a moment. Before we do, I want to remind you of our recap show every Monday at 10 o'clock Pacific, where we will talk about Stephanie's show as well as the other 2 shows from this week and introduce you to the upcoming shows next week. Until then, everyone stay safe, and we'll see you again, Dojo Live, 10 o'clock Pacific on Monday. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.